His wife betrayed him with his best friend, but a secret $100,000 gift turned his heartbreak into a fortune that would crush them both forever. Elliot Kane was the kind of man who believed kindness could heal anything. He built his world on loyalty, friendship, and love. Grace, his beautiful wife, wore that loyalty like perfume in public but stripped it away behind closed doors. And Nathan Cross, the man Elliot once called brother, crossed a line no betrayal could ever undo. Yet when the truth shattered everything Elliot lived for, he didn't break, he built. But how could a single $100,000 gift twist betrayal into power? What did he discover that turned forgiveness into 7 levels of revenge? And how did his act of kindness become the weapon that destroyed them all? The hum of soft jazz floated through the Kane home that evening, brushing against the scent of roasted garlic and red wine. Grace stood by the stove in her cream-colored blouse, stirring sauce in deliberate circles as though every rotation could hold her world together. Elliot walked in, loosened his tie, and smiled. That gentle, grateful smile that made everyone trust him instantly. "Smells incredible," he said, kissing her cheek. "You always know how to turn stress into dinner." Grace smiled faintly, but her eyes darted to her phone, lighting up on the counter. Nathan Cross. She flipped it face down before Elliot could notice. Elliot took 2 plates, setting the table like it was ritual. Their marriage had rituals. Thursday pasta nights, Friday movie cuddles, Saturday errands. On the outside, they were the couple everyone envied. Stability, laughter, 2 kids with matching dimples. Yet under the surface, echoes of their parents' mistakes shaped every silence. Elliot's father had loved too softly, a postal clerk who forgave every wound until forgiveness became his prison. Elliot once caught his mother crying into a note, "He's kind, but kindness doesn't feed dreams." That sentence carved itself into Elliot's heart. From then, he swore kindness would never make him weak. But tonight, it was his only language. Grace's story was darker. Her mother, Evelyn, was a social climber who measured love in bank accounts. She left Grace's father for a wealthier man when Grace was 12. "Loyalty is for the poor," she'd once told her daughter. Grace never forgot. Each man she met afterward became a ladder rung. Love was survival, not affection. Elliot placed the wine bottle down. "Victor Hale called today," he said. "He wants me to lead the cybersecurity audit for cross-development. Big deal." Grace's chest tightened. Nathan Cross, her secret comfort, her forbidden world of champagne penthouses. "That's wonderful," she whispered, careful not to choke on irony. Elliot reached for her hand. "You've been my anchor through all of this, Grace. I wouldn't be half the man I am without you." Her phone buzzed again, trembling on the granite countertop. Nathan's name glowed like guilt itself. She yanked her hand away, pretending to wipe sauce from her blouse. Elliot's gaze lingered, curious but calm. "You okay?" "Yeah, just tired," she murmured. He nodded, unaware that his best friend was calling his wife from a hotel room less than 3 miles away. The same hotel where Elliot once surprised Nathan on his birthday. When dinner ended, Grace slipped to the balcony, pretending to take a client call. The city lights reflected on her wedding ring, shimmering gold hiding invisible rust. Inside, Elliot watched her silhouette and smiled softly. "She's everything my parents never had," he whispered to himself. He couldn't have been more wrong. The following morning, the city woke to soft rain tapping the windows. But inside the Kane home, the world was quiet, almost too quiet. Elliot was packing his laptop bag for an early client meeting, humming softly while Grace scrolled through her phone at the kitchen counter. Her face lit with a message that made her lips part slightly, then tighten, as though she'd just tasted something she wasn't supposed to enjoy. "Who's that?" Elliot asked, zipping his bag. "Just a vendor," she said quickly, placing the phone face down again. "You know how chaotic these events get." He smiled, nodding, trusting her. Always trusting her. That was Elliot Kane's biggest flaw. Across town, Nathan Cross leaned against the window of his high-rise office, scrolling through the same thread of messages, the same photos. His reflection smiled back at him, a man who'd never believed in boundaries. He had always envied Elliot's peace, his loyal marriage, his ability to make people feel safe. Now he was tasting what that safety felt like, wrapped in silk sheets and perfume that didn't belong to him. Nathan had grown up watching betrayal dressed in respectability. His father, a smooth-talking pastor, had preached faithfulness on Sunday mornings and slept with choir members on Sunday nights. His mother had known but stayed for reputation, for comfort, for the illusion of family. Nathan learned young that appearances could erase sins. He carried that lesson like scripture. Grace, on the other hand, carried her own ghosts. When she met Elliot, she saw a gentle man, one who'd never lie, never cheat, never make her feel disposable like her stepfather did. But stability was never enough for a woman raised on chaos. Nathan's confidence pulled her in like gravity. He made her feel dangerous again. Later that day, Elliot met Nathan for lunch at their usual downtown cafe. Rain streaked the glass as laughter filled the small space between them. "Man, I can't thank you enough for that loan," Nathan said, sipping his espresso. "That $100,000 saved my company." Elliot grinned. "You don't have to thank me. You'd do the same for me, right?" Nathan nodded slowly, guilt flickering in his eyes for half a second before dying out. "Of course I would." When Elliot left, Nathan watched him go, jaw clenched. Guilt was a luxury he couldn't afford. Grace was already waiting for him at the hotel that evening, wearing the same black dress she'd once worn to Elliot's company anniversary. That night, Elliot came home to an empty house. Grace had texted, "Late client dinner. Don't wait up." He poured himself a glass of wine, turned on the television, and stared at the doorway where she should have been. He thought about his parents, how his mother had once whispered, "Kind men don't get remembered, Elliot. They get replaced." He'd laughed then, but now, sitting in the dark, her words echoed like prophecy. Outside, the rain grew heavier, and somewhere 3 miles away, in a hotel suite overlooking that same rain-soaked skyline, his wife was whispering another man's name. Elliot began noticing the silence before he understood it. It wasn't loud, not like arguments or slammed doors. It was the kind that hides inside small things, a delayed reply, a smile that doesn't reach the eyes, a perfume that lingers too long after an unexplained night out. One evening, he came home early from a client meeting. Grace wasn't expecting him. The house was too neat, too quiet. Her car was in the driveway, but her shoes, the black heels she always wore when she went to meet clients, were missing. He poured himself coffee and waited, half watching the clock, half dreading what it might confirm. An hour later, she came in breathless, rain-damp hair framing her face. She smiled a little too quickly. "Traffic," she said. "You wouldn't believe how bad it was." He studied her for a moment. Her lipstick was smudged, but she didn't smell of rain. He almost asked, "Almost?" Then he looked at her, remembered the way his mother used to accuse his father of imagined sins, and swallowed the suspicion. His mother's paranoia had destroyed his parents' marriage long before the truth had a chance to breathe. He'd been 15, hiding in his room while they shouted about money, infidelity, and forgiveness that never came. He had promised himself he'd never become that man, the one who interrogated love until it bled. So he said nothing. Instead, he cooked dinner. They ate quietly while the children laughed in the living room, and for a brief moment, he convinced himself everything was fine. But it wasn't just silence that had changed. Grace had started using a new phone case, white marble instead of gold. The old one disappeared, along with the pictures she'd kept of their honeymoon. One night, her phone buzzed again. The same pattern, the same quick glance, the same face-down motion. Elliot smiled softly and said, "You've been getting a lot of late-night messages lately." "Work doesn't stop because it's dark," she replied too fast, avoiding his eyes. Across the city, Nathan poured himself whiskey in his penthouse, staring at his reflection. He told himself it wasn't wrong, that Grace deserved better, that Elliot would never understand her ambition, but deep down, he knew he was taking everything Elliot valued most. Meanwhile, Elliot found something strange at work, a security document from Victor Hale's firm requesting an audit on cross-development, Nathan's company. "Odd coincidence," he murmured. Victor smiled faintly. "Coincidences are where truth hides." That night, Elliot sat alone in the living room after Grace went to bed, scrolling through old photos of their early years. Her laughter, their vacations, their vows. He remembered how she'd once whispered, "You're the safest place I've ever been." He didn't notice her new habit, keeping her phone under her pillow, screen facing down. He didn't see her quiet panic when his footsteps neared the bedroom door, and he didn't yet know that by morning, that same phone would betray her in a way words never could. The morning it happened, nothing felt unusual. The sun cut softly through the blinds, the coffee machine hissed, and the world seemed perfectly still. Grace was rushing as usual, hair half done, blouse unbuttoned at the collar, eyes glued to her phone while she poured coffee she didn't drink. Elliot watched her smiling absently, lost in the quiet adoration of a man who still believed he was loved. "Don't forget Maya's recital," he said, adjusting his tie. Grace nodded, distracted. "Of course not. I'll be there." She left her phone on the counter for a split second when she dashed upstairs to grab her purse. It buzzed once, then again. Elliot glanced instinctively. One notification caught his eye. "Can't wait to see you again tonight. Gee, same sweet." Nathan Cross. His throat tightened. For a moment, the world stopped breathing. The coffee machine beeped, but he couldn't hear it. His pulse roared in his ears. He stared at the message, hands trembling, then at the reflection of himself on the microwave door. Calm, collected, shattered. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. The words were enough to burn through every illusion he'd built. When Grace returned, she noticed her phone had shifted slightly on the counter. Her fingers hesitated before picking it up. Elliot forced a smile so natural it could have fooled God himself. "Forgot your lipstick again?" he asked lightly. She laughed, relieved, unaware the man before her was no longer the same. At work, Elliot's mind was chaos disguised as logic. He moved through meetings mechanically, answering questions, drafting reports. But behind his calm voice, something was building. Not anger, not yet, calculation. He met Victor Hale for lunch at a quiet restaurant. Victor, a man who could read silence better than words, studied him. "Something's wrong." Elliot exhaled. "If you trusted someone more than yourself and they betrayed you, what would you do?" Victor leaned back. "Depends on who they are. If it's business, I destroy them. If it's love," he paused, "then I destroy them carefully." That night, Elliot came home early. His excuse simple. Meeting got canceled. Grace flinched slightly when she heard the garage door open. She had been on the phone, whispering softly but hung up quickly. He kissed her cheek, pretending not to notice. When she went upstairs, he opened his laptop and began something new. A project folder labeled Reconstruction. Inside it, he began drafting a personal audit. Not of companies, but of people. Her calls, her emails, her movements. But before he could go too far, his phone buzzed. A text from Nathan. "Still on for tomorrow's golf?" Elliot stared at it for a long time. His fingers hovered above the keyboard, then typed back 2 words. Wouldn't miss it. The game had begun. The golf course stretched wide under a bright Chicago morning, trimmed perfection masking human rot. Nathan waved from the distance, flashing his usual confident grin. The grin Elliot had once trusted with everything from business secrets to birthday surprises. Elliot forced his own smile, every movement carefully rehearsed, every muscle under control. "About time you got here," Nathan joked, tossing him a club. "Been waiting to beat you all week." Elliot caught it with steady hands. "Let's see if your game's improved since last time." They started down the fairway, easy laughter between them. To an outsider, they were 2 lifelong friends enjoying a Thursday morning. To Elliot, every word felt like a chess move. He studied Nathan the way he studied financial algorithms, calmly, patiently, letting small patterns reveal larger truths. Nathan was more polished today, more rested, like a man who had something, or someone, keeping him up at night in a good way. He smelled faintly of Grace's favorite jasmine cologne, the one she'd gifted Elliot last Christmas. "How's Grace?" Nathan asked, adjusting his swing. Elliot didn't blink. "Busy. You know her. Can't sit still." Nathan smiled. "She's always had that spark." That single word, had, hit harder than the wind. Elliot exhaled slowly, bearing the instinct to swing the club at his friend's face. Instead, he chuckled. "Yeah, she's one of a kind." When they reached the next hole, Nathan's phone buzzed. He tried to be discreet, but Elliot's sharp eyes caught the lock screen notification. Love you too. No name, just a heart emoji. Elliot's grip on his club tightened, knuckles whitening. He kept smiling. You okay, man? Nathan asked. Perfectly fine, Elliot replied. You know, I've been working with Victor Hale again. We're developing new audit software for partner firms, analyzing cross-account transactions. Nathan froze briefly, only a flicker. Sounds intense. Elliot nodded. Yeah, especially when you start finding things you didn't expect. Nathan laughed nervously, trying to brush it off. You and your data obsession, always digging deeper. That's how truth works, Elliot said softly, eyes narrowing. It hides in patterns. The rest of the game was quiet. When it ended, they shook hands. Elliot's grip firm, Nathan's slightly damp. That night back home, Elliot stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror while Grace brushed her hair beside him. You smell like grass, she said, smiling faintly. He turned toward her, expression unreadable. Yeah, had a good game. She laughed lightly. Did you win? He looked her in the eye, his voice smooth, calm, but burning underneath. Not yet. When she left the room, he sat alone and pulled up the first set of tracking data from her phone's backup. Metadata she never knew existed. Time stamps, call durations, hotel Wi-Fi connections. Each line of code whispered a story he didn't want to read, but couldn't stop following. By midnight, the truth was undeniable. Every date, every lie, every secret matched Nathan's schedule. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, whispering to himself, You didn't just betray me. You both built your heaven on my kindness. And in that quiet room, something inside Elliot Kane died, but something far colder was born in its place. The next morning, Elliot drove to work earlier than usual. The city still slept under a gray mist, unaware that a quiet storm was forming behind the windshield of his black sedan. His hands rested calmly on the steering wheel, but his eyes were hollow, sharp, and awake in ways they hadn't been in years. In the office, his assistant, Melissa, greeted him with a hesitant smile. You're early, Mr. Kane. Just needed the silence, he replied. He walked straight to his glass-walled corner office, locked the door, and powered up a new encrypted system he'd coded overnight. Folder name, crossed lines. Inside it, he began uploading financial data, cross-developments invoices, partnership files, payment trails, all information he had access to through the cybersecurity audit Victor Hale had recently assigned him. Every number was a breadcrumb, and every breadcrumb led to Nathan Cross. Offshore accounts, dummy vendors, suspicious fund transfers labeled under consulting. Elliot traced them all, screenshotting quietly, building his case like an architect of ruin. By noon, he called Victor into the office. Do you remember when you told me betrayal is best punished in silence? Victor nodded. I do. Why? Elliot turned the screen toward him. Because silence just got louder. Victor's eyes narrowed as he scanned the data. That's money laundering. And these dates align with Cross's charity projects. Elliot nodded once. And some of those transfers are under Grace Kane's name. Victor's jaw tightened. Your wife? Elliot's voice was ice. For now. He leaned back, the fluorescent light reflecting off his wedding band. I want to build something bigger, Victor. A new cybersecurity firm, independent, clean, and fully automated. I'll use the $100,000 mentorship fund you left me years ago. It's time I claim it. Victor watched him carefully. This isn't just business for you. No, Elliot said. This is the beginning. That night, he returned home early again. Grace wasn't there. Another late event. He poured himself whiskey, sat by the fireplace, and watched the flames twist like the trust he once had. The children had gone to bed, their laughter now painful echoes of a family that never truly existed. When Grace finally came home past midnight, she looked startled to see him awake. You're still up? Couldn't sleep, he said softly. You should rest. You look tired. She smiled faintly. Long day. Elliot studied her face. How's Nathan? Still busy? Her eyes flickered just enough. I haven't seen him lately. He smiled, a calm, knowing smile that chilled the air. Good. Distance keeps things honest. She forced a nod and disappeared upstairs. When the door clicked shut, Elliot opened his laptop and pressed send. The first packet of encrypted evidence, Cross Development's internal irregularities, went straight to the State Financial Crimes Unit anonymously. He wasn't ready to expose everything yet, but it was a start. In that dimly lit room, Elliot whispered a quiet vow to himself. You both built your sins on my generosity, so I'll make generosity your downfall. For the first time, vengeance didn't feel like rage. It felt like precision. The trap began quietly, like everything Elliot did. He didn't rage, didn't scream, didn't confront. He simply smiled more, listened more, and let Grace and Nathan believe they were safe. The art of revenge, he realized, was patience disguised as peace. At breakfast, he kissed Grace's cheek and said he'd recommended Nathan's company for a high-profile audit. It'll raise both our reputations, he told her warmly, pouring orange juice. It's a big client. Victor's team will handle everything. Grace's spoon froze midair. You're auditing Nathan's company? He nodded casually. Purely professional. You know me, I don't mix friendship with work. Inside, she panicked. She'd helped Nathan move some of those questionable funds herself, trusting his assurances that everything was handled. The last thing she needed was Elliot's firm anywhere near those records. That same day, she met Nathan in a quiet cafe downtown. You have to stop this audit, she hissed. If Elliot's company digs in, they'll find everything. Nathan leaned back, calm but sweating beneath his designer shirt. Relax, Grace. Elliot's too soft. He'll never suspect us. Grace wasn't so sure. You didn't see his face this morning. He was different. Nathan smiled. Then keep him distracted. He reached across the table, tracing her fingers. That's what you're good at. Elliot sat in his car across the street, camera lens fixed on them through the windshield. He didn't flinch when Nathan touched her hand. He just took the picture, time-stamped it, and saved it in a hidden folder named Layer 2. That evening, he returned home early, carrying dinner and her favorite wine. You've been working too hard, he said warmly. Let's eat in. Her guilt made her fidgety, but she played along. Over dinner, Elliot talked about their future, about maybe taking a family trip, maybe buying new property. He even laughed, pretending like nothing was wrong. But every word was part of a new narrative he was crafting. The story of a loyal husband blindsided by deceit. The next week, the audit officially began. Victor handled the formalities while Elliot quietly fed his team subtle hints, directing them towards specific accounts without revealing how he knew. Within days, red flags appeared. Nathan's legal department tried to stall. Grace received a nervous text. We need to talk. This audit's getting dangerous. Meanwhile, Elliot took Maya and Tyler to school that Friday, stopping by a coffee shop afterward. There, he ran into Detective Aaron Voss, Victor's old contact. They'd met once at a tech conference. Elliot greeted him with polite conversation, then dropped a single line. If someone was embezzling through real estate shell firms, how long before the SEC catches on? Aaron raised an eyebrow. Depends on who tipped them off? Elliot smiled faintly. Anonymous whistleblowers still get results, right? Aaron's slow grin was all the answer he needed. That night, while Grace was in the shower, Elliot stood by the window, looking at the city lights, the same skyline she had once admired with Nathan. He whispered quietly, You wanted wealth and power. You'll get both, just not the way you imagine. He checked his phone one last time before bed. A new email from Victor. Cross-development audit escalating, requesting federal involvement. The silence that followed was sweet. It was the sound of the walls beginning to close in. 2 weeks later, chaos bled into every headline. Cross-development under federal investigation. News anchors dissected numbers Elliot had quietly placed in their hands through Victor's firm. Television screens glowed in offices, lobbies, and cafes across Chicago. The words fraud, shell accounts, and money laundering began circling Nathan Cross's name like vultures. Elliot sat in his office, expression steady, fingers laced on his desk as the media storm unfolded. Outside his window, the city carried on, unaware that its calm skyline hid a quiet war between two men who once shared everything. Victor walked in, holding a printed report. "They've frozen his assets," he said. "Cross can't even access his private accounts. He's finished." Elliot looked up. "Not yet. This is only the surface." Across town, Grace stood trembling in the kitchen, scrolling through news updates. Her phone buzzed with one desperate message after another from Nathan. "Nathan, don't answer reporters, don't say a word." "Nathan, if they link you to the wire transfers, we're both done." "Nathan, you still have the files I sent you, right? Delete them now." Grace's stomach turned. She'd used her name to help him move money. Just paperwork, she thought then, harmless favors between friends. Now her fingerprints were all over the crime. Elliot walked in quietly, home early again. She jumped, nearly dropping the phone. "Rough day?" he asked gently. "Yeah," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "Just work drama." He nodded. "I saw the news. Nathan's company's in trouble. Surprising, isn't it?" Her heart skipped. "Yeah. I didn't know." He watched her carefully, eyes soft but unreadable. "You two were close once. I just hope he wasn't dragging you into anything." Her pulse throbbed in her ears. "Of course not." "Good," he said quietly, stepping closer, "because I'd hate to find out otherwise." When he left the room, Grace leaned against the counter, her knees weak. For the first time, she realized he knew. Not everything, but enough. She tried calling Nathan, but he didn't answer. His lawyer had advised him to disappear until the investigation settled. The next morning, Elliot met with Cassandra Reed, the attorney Victor had recommended. Brilliant, ruthless, and utterly discreet, she listened to everything without interruption. The affair, the transfers, the messages, the loan. "Do you have proof of infidelity?" she asked. Elliot opened his laptop and showed her the photos from the cafe. "Enough to sink them both." Cassandra nodded. "We'll file for divorce quietly, under infidelity and financial fraud. But if you want to go further..." "I do," he said calmly. "I want to know if those children are mine." Her expression softened. "Are you sure you want that answer?" He stared at the framed photo on his desk. Maya's bright smile, Tyler's small hand in his. "I've been sure for weeks." By evening, Dr. Elise Monroe had discreetly collected samples. Toothbrushes, hair strands, the quiet DNA of truth. Elliot kissed his children goodnight, heart splitting between love and dread. When Grace came to bed, he lay beside her like nothing had changed. But outside, on his office server, a file named Final Layer was uploading slowly. Evidence, court drafts, and the results of a test he'd never wanted to see. The next morning, an email from Dr. Monroe appeared in his inbox. He read the first line and closed his eyes. Neither child was his. He didn't cry. He simply whispered, "Now it's complete." The courtroom smelled faintly of polished wood and cold justice. Reporters clustered outside, cameras ready. Inside, Elliot Kane sat at the plaintiff's table, hands folded, face composed. Across from him sat Grace, trembling, trying to hold her composure in a fitted navy dress that suddenly felt too tight. Beside her, Nathan avoided eye contact, jaw clenched, his once effortless confidence now brittle. The judge entered. "Court is now in session. Case, Elliot Kane versus Grace Kane, on grounds of infidelity, fraud, and financial misconduct." Cassandra Reed stood with calm authority. "Your Honor, the evidence will show that my client, Mr. Kane, was not only betrayed emotionally, but exploited financially by both his wife and his closest friend." Elliot didn't look at Grace. He focused on the table, tracing the grain of the wood with his thumb, counting his breaths like a man watching a storm he'd already survived. Grace's attorney, Henry Dalton, rose quickly. "Your Honor, this is a smear campaign fueled by jealousy. My client denies all allegations of infidelity and financial misconduct." Judge Rebecca Nolan's eyes flicked toward Elliot. "Mr. Kane, do you wish to address the court before we proceed?" He stood slowly. "Only this, Your Honor. I believed in kindness all my life. I gave my best friend a $100,000 loan to save his company. I trusted my wife with everything, my home, my name, my heart. What I received in return wasn't love. It was investment fraud disguised as marriage." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Grace's hands shook. Dalton whispered, "Don't react." Cassandra clicked a button on the projector. Photos appeared. Grace and Nathan at the cafe, at the hotel, at the gala she told Elliot she couldn't attend. Then came the financial documents. Wire transfers linking Grace's account to Cross Development's offshore subsidiaries. Nathan's lawyer objected. "Relevance?" Cassandra turned, voice sharp. "Relevance? My client funded those same accounts under the impression he was helping his friend avoid bankruptcy. Instead, that money paid for private hotels, jewelry, and travel." Judge Nolan leaned forward. "Mr. Cross, is this true?" Nathan opened his mouth, but nothing came. Grace glanced at him desperately, but he stared straight ahead, hands folded. Then came the final blow. Cassandra nodded to a clerk, who handed the judge a sealed envelope. "Your Honor," Cassandra said quietly, "the DNA test results Mr. Kane requested are now available." Grace's face drained of color. "DNA test?" she whispered. Elliot finally looked at her, not with anger, but pity. "I had to know, Grace." The judge broke the seal, scanned the report, then looked up. "Neither child is biologically Mr. Kane's." The room fell into stunned silence. Grace gasped, clutching the table as though it could hold her upright. Nathan's lawyer exhaled sharply, knowing the case was lost. Elliot's hand stayed steady. "You took everything from me, Grace, even the right to call myself a father. So I'll take back what you built on my name." Grace's voice cracked. "Elliot, please." But the gavel struck. Divorce granted. Mrs. Kane is found guilty of infidelity and fraudulent financial activity. Custody denied. Mr. Kane retains full rights to all shared assets. Reporters outside captured every moment as Grace stumbled out, tears streaking her makeup, flashes bursting like gunfire. Nathan followed silently, escorted by officers for questioning on corporate fraud. Elliot walked past them without a word, his face unreadable, his wedding ring left on the bench behind him. That evening, as the headlines blazed, "Betrayal Exposed," Tech CEO wins brutal court battle, Elliot sat alone on his balcony, city lights glimmering below. He lifted his glass of whiskey toward the skyline and whispered, "Level 5 complete." By the time evening settled over Chicago, Grace Kane's name was everywhere. Not in the elegant wedding magazines she once adored, but across finance blogs, gossip sites, and primetime news tickers. Event planner exposed in corporate fraud scandal. Cameras followed her every move like predators. She tried to enter her office the next morning, but 2 security guards blocked her path. "Orders from the board," one said flatly. "You're on indefinite leave pending investigation." Grace's heels clicked against marble as she turned away, every step echoing her fall from the world she'd fought to enter. People who once complimented her taste now whispered behind their phones. The same friends who envied her diamond ring now avoided her calls. She dialed Nathan again, straight to voicemail. At that same hour, Nathan Cross was in a holding cell downtown, stripped of his Rolex and bravado. His lawyers were scrambling, but the SEC's evidence, fed quietly by Elliot's encrypted reports, was airtight. He stared at the wall, remembering the man who once handed him a check for $100,000 without hesitation. "You'd do the same for me, right?" Elliot had said. He hadn't realized then it was a question that would one day bury him. Meanwhile, Elliot's world had gone strangely calm. Reporters camped outside his gate, but he said nothing. He returned to his office, met Victor Hale, and shook his hand like a man closing a final chapter. Victor studied him quietly. "You did it," Elliot nodded. "Not yet. There's one more thing left." That thing arrived in the form of a court-ordered financial settlement. Grace had tried appealing for alimony, claiming she'd supported Elliot emotionally through his startup years. Cassandra Reed tore that argument apart with surgical precision. "Mrs. Kane," she said before the judge, "your support included helping another man defraud investors using your husband's money. There will be no alimony, no sympathy. You'll repay what you stole." The ruling hit the news that afternoon. Grace lost her business license, her luxury SUV, her credit cards. Everything she'd built on Elliot's kindness collapsed overnight. When she showed up uninvited at his office days later, she looked unrecognizable, pale, sleepless, trembling. Elliot, she whispered, standing at the door as his secretary froze. Please, I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. The kids, they're not mine, he said quietly without looking up from his desk. Don't use them to find sympathy you've already spent. Tears streamed down her face. I was scared. Nathan, he said you'd never be enough, that you'd always stay small. He looked at her then, and for the first time his expression softened, not with forgiveness, but with understanding. You traded love for power, Grace, but power without truth always ends in poverty. She covered her mouth to keep from sobbing. What happened to you? You're not the man I married. He turned his laptop toward her screen. On it was the logo of his new company, Reconstruct Systems, already trending in the business sector. No, he said. I'm the man your betrayal built. As she left the office, the receptionist avoided her eyes. Cameras flashed outside again, catching the broken woman walking past the empire of the man she destroyed. That night, Nathan's arrest hit national television. Grace watched it alone from a cheap hotel room she could barely afford. His mugshot filled the screen, and she laughed through her tears, a sharp, bitter sound. He promised we'd win. Across town, Elliot stood by his balcony again, watching the same broadcast in silence. He didn't smile, didn't gloat. He just whispered, Level 6. The rain began to fall again, washing the glass clean, the same way time was beginning to wash away the man he once was. Months passed, and the city that once witnessed Elliot Kane's heartbreak now whispered his name in reverence. Reconstruct Systems had become the fastest-growing cybersecurity firm in the Midwest, landing government contracts, corporate clients, and a reputation built on integrity. Investors called him the man who turned betrayal into an algorithm. Elliot arrived at the new downtown headquarters early each morning, never late, never loud. The office buzzed with quiet admiration. Employees respected the calm precision with which he led. Victor Hale often said, You built something out of ashes, Elliot. That's rare. It wasn't the ashes, Elliot replied once. It was the fire. Every trace of his old life was gone. The family photos, the wedding ring, the house where laughter had lived, all replaced by sleek glass and purpose. But even in success, there were nights when silence crept in, whispering old memories. Sometimes he'd pour a drink, stand at his window, and see not the city skyline, but the reflection of the man he'd been before everything burned. One Friday evening, Reconstruct sponsored a charity gala for families destroyed by financial fraud. The media called it Kane's Redemption Night. Elliot walked the marble foyer with Amanda Brooks, Victor's niece, now his co-founder, and the steady, grounded voice in his new world. You're donating everything from the cross-settlement to this? She asked softly. He nodded. That money was stolen trust. I don't want to keep it. As flashbulbs flickered, Grace watched the live coverage from a small television behind the reception desk of a downtown hotel. The woman who once hosted charity galas was now checking in guests, wearing a name tag that read, Grace K. She froze as Elliot appeared on the screen. Standing tall beside Amanda, cameras capturing the quiet dignity that had replaced his pain. Reporters surrounded him. Mr. Kane, any comment on your ex-wife's recent bankruptcy filing? Elliot smiled faintly. No comment. We all make choices. Mine was to rebuild. Applause followed. Grace's fingers tightened around the remote until it cracked. Tears spilled before she could stop them. She had wanted power, luxury, prestige, and lost everything chasing them. Now the man she'd discarded stood where she once dreamed of standing. Later that night, after the gala ended, Elliot stepped onto the rooftop terrace. The city stretched endlessly before him, lights shimmering like possibilities. Amanda joined him, holding 2 glasses of wine. You did it, she said quietly. He looked at her, the wind brushing his face. No, he said. I survived it. There's a difference. Below them, cameras flashed again, documenting a man reborn. Somewhere across the city in a quiet motel room, Nathan Cross scrolled through the same photos on a smuggled phone, rage hollowing him out. He thinks it's over, he muttered. Grace, lying awake in her rented bed, whispered the opposite. He won. Elliot returned home near midnight, placed his keys on the counter, and opened his journal for the first time since the trial. On the first blank page, he wrote, "Kindness is not weakness. It's the foundation for vengeance that leaves no fingerprints." He closed the book, exhaled, and looked out at the skyline again. "Level 7, he whispered. 5 years later, autumn wrapped the city in amber light. The world had moved on, but some ghosts refused to fade quietly. Elliot Kane stood outside a modest community center his foundation had built. The Victor Project, a mentorship hub for single fathers and men recovering from emotional and financial trauma. Inside, laughter echoed through the halls, the sound of men healing from the kind of wounds he once thought were fatal. He adjusted his cufflinks and smiled faintly. He no longer wore bitterness, only calm. Amanda Brooks approached from behind, a file in hand and warmth in her eyes. "You sure you want to handle this one personally?" Elliot nodded. "I owe it to the past." Inside the office sat Grace. The years had changed her. Her hair was shorter, streaked with gray. The proud sparkle in her eyes was gone, replaced by something quieter. Remorse. She stood when he entered, hands shaking slightly. "I didn't think you'd come," she said. "I wasn't sure I would," he replied softly, closing the door behind him. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence carried years of everything that had been said and all that never would be. "I heard about the center," she said finally. "You're helping a lot of people." "That's the point," he said, "to turn what broke me into something that saves others." Grace lowered her head. "I'm sorry, Elliot, for all of it. The money, the lies, the kids, everything. You didn't deserve any of it." He watched her closely, searching her face not for lies but for truth. He saw it there, aged, weathered, sincere. "I used to think forgiveness was weakness," he said quietly, "that if I let go, I'd be letting you win. But forgiveness isn't for you, Grace. It's for me." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I lost everything. I lost myself." He nodded gently. "You traded love for illusion? You weren't the first. You won't be the last." She looked up, eyes glistening. "Did you ever stop loving me?" He paused, then smiled sadly. "I stopped loving the version of you that betrayed me. The woman sitting here now, I think she's finally real." Grace broke down, covering her face with her hands. "I wish I could undo it." Elliot stood. "We can't rewrite the past, Grace, but we can live with it differently." He placed an envelope on the desk. "A grant. Enough for you to start over. I've written your name into the Foundation's community fund. No one will know. Consider it the last kindness." She stared at it, stunned. "After everything I did?" He met her eyes. "You taught me that mercy is the final revenge." When he left, the late afternoon light poured through the windows, painting her face gold. She whispered after him, "You really were too kind for me." Outside, Amanda waited by the car. "You okay?" Elliot looked up at the sky, peaceful for the first time in years. "Yeah," he said. "It's done." As they drove away, the city lights began to flicker on, one by one, like small redemptions scattered across the skyline. And in that moment, Elliot Kane wasn't the man who'd been betrayed. He was the man who had learned that revenge only ends when peace begins. He closed his eyes and whispered to himself, "Kindness was never my weakness. It was my weapon." Then for the first time in years, he smiled.